Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea, and you know if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, Power Change Purchase Incorporated LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchase Incorporated LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the effects of high energy costs. At our historically Black colleges and universities to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the and underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African American and African American community on the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk Radio programs as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. You also know, ladies and gentlemen, if you join us on a regular basis, that the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, then the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. Now, this show is also brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar, along, along with the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSLF HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative, and you can get more information on that initiative by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. Go over to our good fund link, and you'll find out, ladies and gentlemen, that we're certainly not the greedy, but we are definitely the needy here on this platform as we attempt to bring you news that you can use every week. We're certainly not. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest today, but we do have a very important subject matter that we have to discuss with our listening audience today. And if many of you who have joined us uh, know that we have been beating a drum around the Corporate Transparency Act of 2024, which is required legislation 2535, which was introduced back in 2021, which went in effect on January 1 of 2024. Now, the Corporate Transparency Act was passed in 2021. And as we've indicated, it went into effect in January 1 of 2024, which requires any business which is doing business in the U.S. that has under $5 million in gross receipts and under 20 employees to file a beneficial owner report with the U.S. Department of Commerce, FinCEN division. Now, in doing so, there were 23 exemptions. In those 23 exemptions, you found that there were nonprofit 501c3 organizations. And we will also discuss today HR 9495, which is legislation which has made its way through the House. It was voted upon last week. And originally you had 52 Congress people who, Democrats, who had signed on to this bill. And there was such a groundswell of activism around why would you give Donald Trump more energy and power as his administration comes to is coming to office. Now, as we looked at the legislation make its way through the House, when the final vote was finally taken on last week, the number of Democrats who pushed the button on the vote was down to 15 because you had the ACCLU, you had all of your churches, universities, and your activist community and stakeholders who, in fact, sent letters, email, and telephone calls to Capitol Hill. Now, as those calls went in, those voices were heard, and you had some, I think, about 38 congressmen who reconsidered their vote. Now, this is why we're talking about this morning. This case was heard in the Eastern District of Texas, and a federal judge, in fact, did in fact issue a national injunction. Now, this injunction goes into effect and will impact the December 31st deadline for filing this report with the Department of Commerce FinCEN division, which would be reinforced by Congress. So let's uh, uh, restate the deadlines as it relates to the filing requirements. Now, the date was if you incorporated a business before January 1st of 2024, you had until December 31st of this year to file the report with the Department of Commerce. If you incorporated a business that started and was filed with a state register or a state department for a licensing, regardless of what type of business it was. And that business was incorporated in the first week of January 2024. You only had 90 days to respond. If you did not respond, the fine started at originally it was $500 a day. The National Small Business Trade Association as it in fact did bring legal action, and a judge ruled in the Fifth District Court of Alabama Circuit Court, federal judge, that this was unconstitutional and that the members of the National Small Business Trade Association did not have to file this report, but it only covered the 60,000 members of the National Small Business Trade Association that were already registered as members with the National Small Business Trade Association as of March 1st, 2024. So what ended up proceeding from that, there was other litigation brought by other industry interests, which we would look at the impact of the Corporate Transparency Act on the real estate industry. And it was required by law, if you, in fact, are one who participates in the short term lease rental industry, that you had to form an LLC to do business and be able to generate income through their app. Now, this uh, piece of legislation heavily impacted the entire industry. The industry, as we know, is known as national brand names as Airbnb and Verbo. In 2023, did Airbnb generated $8.7 billion. The next national brand entity, which is Verbo, did $1.7 billion. In the US alone, in 2023, the short-term lease rental industry generated $64 billion. And in 2023, worldwide, the industry generated $109 billion. Now we have to look at who cake or cheese is the short-term lease industry eating. It's eating the hotel motel industry in this country. And we know how powerful the hotel and motel and restaurant trade associations are in the US. Now, this impacts on the number one exporter of the United States, which people don't think about. It's called entertainment. When we begin to look at our way our economy is structured, inside of the structure of our economy, we know that your larger urban markets, or what we refer to as our culture centers, where we have all of our museums and artifacts and sports teams and major sporting markets. And they are also known as our art centers. So when we look at the National Basketball Association, NFL, Major League Basketball, and all of our sports, before we even look at our colleges and universities, they are the number one income generators for our major cities. Now, this has played out. Add on to that the I call it the plandemic rather than the pandemic that basically brought the U.S. and the worldwide economy to a halt. So as we are digging out of that, this legislation, we're looking at downtown office buildings going unoccupied because businesses that had previously were downtown with commercial space, a lot of them didn't renew their lease agreements in these new buildings that have been built all over the U.S. So we're looking at a falling dominoes. Okay, and what that domino effect is, let's look at the Corporate Transparency Act and what this specific legislation or bill did provide, and what we did look at, and what was considered at that time when this legislation and these bills were passed. So we've been beating the drum around the Corporate Transparency Act, and as of yesterday, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas issued a nationwide preliminary injunction halting the reporting requirements for the Corporate Transparency Act. On December 3rd, 2024, in the case of Texas Top Cop Shop Inc. versus Garland, a federal district court in the Eastern District Court of Texas issued an order granting a nationwide preliminary injunction that one, enjoins Corporate Transparency Act CTA, including enforcement of that statute and the regulations implementing its beneficial ownership information reporting requirements, and specifically stays all deadlines to comply with the CTA reporting requirements. The basis of the opinion was that the CTA exceeds the congressional power under both Commerce Clause and the Necessary and Proper Clause. The U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. on behalf of the Department of Treasury, filed a notice of appeal on December the 5th, 2024. On December the 7th, 2024, FinCEN posted a notice on its website stating that the following: while the litigation is ongoing, FinCEN will FinCEN will comply with the order issued by the U.S. District Court by the Eastern District Court of Texas for as long as it remains in effect. Therefore, reporting companies are not currently required to their beneficial owners information with FinCEN and will not be subject to liability if they fail to do so while the preliminary injunction remains in effect. Nevertheless, reporting companies may continue to voluntarily submit beneficial ownership information reports. Next steps, so because we got to look at the longer game, because the government's already filed a notice of appeal. The scope of the injunction may face the challenges of appeal. And the timing of the appeal is likewise certain. If the injunction scope is limited or the government's appeal is unsuccessful, companies could be required to file beneficial ownership information on short notice. In consideration of these developments, companies should decide if they should prefer to voluntarily file their beneficial ownership information or to take wait and see approach depending on the outcome of the appeal. Companies opting out to voluntarily file should nevertheless consider competing and the analysis required to determine if the reporting companies. And their beneficial owners so that they can prepare to file the filing obligations as they are if the obligation is reinstated. Morgan Lewis will continue to monitor and develop uh, uh, developments pertaining to the case as they arise. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to me reading of the actual article, which was done by Morgan and Lewis. And we always give credit where credit is due. This was an outstanding article. It was authored by James. R. Preston, and Jane Shane of Boston. Uh, you had Carl A. Valentine of Houston, Jeffrey Dinerstein of Orange County, Todd Hintich of Philadelphia, Benjamin R. Willis of Washington, D.C. So we say kudos to these investigative reporters that were able to turn this article out as the same day that the decision came from the courts, which today is Wednesday. This dropped on Monday, which was the 9th of December 2024. So this is what we're working with, ladies and gentlemen. We wanted to make sure that we got this information out to our listening audience. We've been beating the drum about this uh, legislation because we felt that it was quite dangerous the way it was cloaked as it was passed through Congress. This bill was originally passed. and as it was passed as a bill to stop illicit business practices for money laundering to finance terrorism. Now, let's tie that to HR 9495, which last week we saw the legislation actually make its way through the House. It has not, and is over at the Senate. And as we know, by December the 20th, Congress must pass a budget. Now, Congress has been kicking the can down the road with these extension CRs, and that's what they're do again, because they are hell bent on cutting Social Security and Medicaid and giving these tremendous tax credits to the 1%, tax credits for the wealthy and the billionaires in this country. Now, we know this. We know the playbook. They've already laid it out in what they call Project 25, something that I call him Code 45 plus two, because he will be our 47th person sitting down in 1600. I'm not going to refer to him as a president. Now, as we look at this legislation, HR 9495, it comes to play. Well, what were they thinking about? Now, inside of the Corporate Transparency Act, those who followed that understood that there were 23 exemptions. In those 23 exemptions, nonprofit organizations were exempt from having to file the corporate transparency report. This legislation, which has hit, as we would say, like a ton, like a ton of bricks, we are aware of the fact this this is the article. This is the article that was posted on November 12th, 2024. It was done by an author by Catherine Fung. Why are Democrats giving Donald Trump more power? full list of Democrats who voted for a bill that gives Trump administration more power. Now, President-elect Donald Trump speaks to West Palm Beach, Florida. Congress Congress.gov Bill 118th Congress, House Bill 9495. In a blog posted urging members of Congress to kill the bill, as I indicated in the blog posted urging Congress to kill the bill, the ACL senior policy consultant said freedom to dissent without fear of government retaliation is a vital part of any well functioning democracy, which is why Congress must block H.R. 95 before it is too late. Under the bill, once the organization is notified about its terrorist supporting designation, it had would have 90 days to appeal it before it is stripped of its 501c3 status. The law would not require the Treasury officials to explain the reasoning behind the decision or for the department to provide evidence. Trump has begun filling the cabinet but has not announced who will lead the Department of Treasury. Billionaire investor John Paulson took himself out of the possible pick on Tuesday, suggesting that the investor Scott Bensett and Trump's transition co-chair Howard Lutnick could succeed current Secretary Janet Yellen. The bill comes as the war in Gaza continues into its 13th month. At the 43,600,000 Palestinians have been killed and another 102,992 wounded since the war broke out October 7, 2023, last year, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. An estimated 113 and 93 people were killed in Israel on the day of Hamas led the attack. More than 200 people were taken hostages. Now, this is an article that dropped. Ladies and gentlemen, this is some dangerous legislation. And with that being said, we uh called in Reverend Al Sharp to the show, and we are an avid listener, and we shared this information on last week. Now, I have been in contact with uh, Carl Nelson, who produces a show in the morning from 6 to 10 a.m. on the Urban One Radio Network to see if who's paying attention to what's going on around this Corporate Transparency Act, because this is the biggest Christmas present that some 42 million U.S. small businesses could have ever received, because they're not subject to fines that will run them $591 a day. And when that amount would hit 10,000, you probably would get your first letter from the feds. And you don't play with the U.S. Department of Treasury, and the IRS, because they can and will make life very, very difficult for someone trying to operate a business. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we uh, wanted to make sure that we got this segment of our show done this morning on the Corporate Transparency Act. We hope we as we've indicated, we hope we brought some clarity around this issue, because you will not have to file this report by December 31st of 2024, which is only a few days away. And we have, as I've indicated, if anyone who's been following me here on this platform, even though our primary focus is the energy industry, we have beat the drum around this because we see this bill as a deal breaker. And I've had this subject with many attorneys and accountants around this legislative piece, and everybody have come to the same conclusion. This conclusion was that it is a business killer. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a slight pause for the cause here on the platform of solar now in the future with its economic impact. And we're going to spend the last 10 minutes of our show this morning. We're going to talk about how uh, and what the Biden administration has done and the impact of the executive order from his agenda, Build Back Better. And what did the African American community really get from the Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act? One second here, ladies and gentlemen. We've been very, very busy here trying to make sure we can cover all our bases here on the platform of Solar Now in the future with its economic impact on Black America. We are still on the air, and you know that call-in number is 646-668-2948. Once again, our call-in number is 646-668-2948. Yes, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the airways of Solar Now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. We've been attempting to try to keep everything going on here on our platform, and we're having a few issues this morning with keying up our intro music Yeah, we seem to be having some difficulty with our intro music here on our platform this morning, ladies and gentlemen. But we are very, very appreciative that you have taken time out of your busy schedule. Now, we still have a few minutes here, ladies and gentlemen. Our call-in number is 646-668-2948. Once again, that call-in number is 646-668-2948. Please remember to press 1 on your phone pad. Because you'll be in our green room, and we want to bring you right on into our living room because we've been toiling here on our platform Solar Now in the future with its economic impact on Black America this morning, ladies and gentlemen, really trying to make sure that we brought you news that you could definitely use as it relates to what we've been attempting to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to bring this to your attention that when President Biden came to office, the first thing he did was to sign executive orders 14006, 14016, and 13895. Those executive orders gave rise to uh, the Biden Harris Invest in America agenda. Now, if you need to know what the Biden and Harris administration has done, the Build Back Infrastructure law provides billions of dollars in foundational investment in infrastructure such as roads, highways, bridges, drinking water, wastewater systems, with $568 billion announced. For over 66,000 projects so far. The CHIPS and the Science Act provides 39 billion dollars in grants and other incentives to semiconductor companies to build fabrication plants and provide cutting edge technology in the United States, of which $34 billion worth of preliminary agreements have been announced. $34 billion. And the Inflation Reduction Act includes tax credits, grants, loans to spur investment in comprehensive deployment of clean energy, including manufacturing of battery components and critical mineral rights here at home. Core to the investment in American model is spending clear demand signals addressing supply side constricts and solving coordination problems, all while strengthening and supporting made in America, just domestic capability, capacity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be able to find this information under our news and events segment, which says that the Biden-Harris administration has catalyzed $1 trillion in U.S. private sector clean energy semiconductors and other things. Well, that's great. The problem that I'm having with this, out of $1.7 trillion that was spent by the six federal agencies, less than 2% went to African American owned businesses, entities, and nonprofits, CDFIs, and banks. Now, when we began to break this thing down and we began to look at who did the heavy lifting, you will find out the executive order created an Office of Energy justice, and equity. That office was created in 6 federal agencies, where 40% of the benefit of that investment of the $1.7 trillion was supposed to go to low and moderate income communities. When we begin to look at this situation and look at the fact that those agencies which have designed those programs, which have written the policy, that have initiated this inside of the federal agencies themselves, such as the Department of Energy. Now, these offices of energy, justice, and equity are not codified through Congress. They were created by Biden's executive order. That means there is no funding to move this critical component that has designed everything and pushed this funding out the door to continue. And our call as we close is for people to get on the phone and call the congressmen and the representatives, state legislators that understand that one administration creates programs, it may take an entire first 4 years to create the policy. The next 4 years, that policy kicks kicks in, and the money. So, with that being said, that's where we find ourselves with climate deniers, with people are talking about they want to, there's no such thing as climate change. We know it's real, ladies and gentlemen. And on that, we've come to another close of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Uh, Solar Now with its economic on Black America. So as we go, as we normally do, as we close our show, we don't want you to meet us back here, ladies and gentlemen. We want you to beat us back here as we try to bring you informative information on information around the energy industry and its economic impact on Black America. With that being said, till next week, go in peace.